Australian barley farmers just had one of their best harvests. Rainy weather at the start of 2020 helped revive their fields after a years-long drought.
Weather was benign for us, or turned around positively in late January into February and set it up for a great crop. And we are actually in the middle of harvesting what is one of our best crops ever.
They're now sitting on about 12 million tons of the grain, but selling it will be hard. The industry's biggest market, China, imposed an 80% tariff on Australian barley in May. The government's now taking up the farmers' cause. Canberra seeking mediation from the World Trade Organization to have the extra taxes trimmed or struck down.
We are highly confident that based on the evidence, data and analysis we have put together already, Australia has an incredibly strong case to mount in relation to defending the integrity and propriety of our grain growers and barley producers.
China's accusing Australia of giving out hefty farm subsidies so it can sell crops at cheap prices. Canberra denies the accusation, but it's just part of an ongoing dispute that's affected beef, cotton, coal, and wine shipments. That's cost the Australian economy about $20 billion. Beijing says relations have been poisoned by Australian meddling in Chinese politics and restrictions on the operations of companies like Huawei. But the government hasn't officially linked those issues to trade.
Chinese authorities have taken some measures on exports from Australia to China based on law recently. This fits China's laws and regulations and international norms. This is also an action that is responsible in regards to Chinese domestic industries and customers.
There's one Aussie commodity Beijing hasn't ditched yet. China gets about 60% of its iron ore from down under. That trade is worth $85 billion a year, and officials are confident it'll continue whatever the weather. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
All right, for more, let's go to Paul Frighters in London. He's a professor of well-being economics at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Mr. Frighters, thank you so much for joining us here on TRT World. Firstly, do you believe Australia could present a strong case to the World Trade Organization? And if so, what exactly can the WTO do?
Australia can certainly present a very strong case, but one shouldn't expect Australia to get its way via the World Trade Organization. So what you are seeing is symbolism from the Australian government. They want to show to their farmers that they really care, and they want to be seen to be doing something against these tariffs. But it's fairly futile. I mean, there's no way that they can get a true resolution of this trade dispute via the WTO.
So simply symbolic then. Well, this trade dispute seems to have begun after Australia supported U.S. criticism of China's response to the coronavirus pandemic. And of course, the relationship deteriorated after China tweeted a fake image of an Australian soldier killing an Afghan child. How bad can this get between the two countries, and how much is it going to cost?
It can get pretty bad, but this has been brewing for various years. So Australia has been in the position of its main trading partner is China. 40% of its exports go there, but politically speaking, it's totally part of the West. It's got two large military American bases on its soil, and basically its American allies are now wedging it and forcing it to break up politically with China, meaning that now the Chinese are taking revenge in an economic way. And already a lot of the trade ties have been broken. So China has stopped sending students to Australia, no tourists to Australia, is discouraging its businesses from going to Australia, from investing in Australia, and is now hitting Australia in terms of the food and minerals exports. And as your documentary so rightly said, the only thing that it's not halting is the iron ore, because basically China is dependent on Australian iron ore, and Australia makes a lot of money on the iron ore, so neither side will disrupt that. And what will happen is that Australia will simply sell its minerals and its food on the world market without too much fuss. So what we're seeing is a transition period whereby Australian exports are going to go to other countries.
And of course, China is angry, basically, for some stances that Australia has taken against Beijing. Do you see this being resolved anytime soon, and how can it be resolved, really?
I don't see it being resolved at all. No, Australia has in the last couple of years moved against China in terms of rhetoric, and so it's tried to resist the Belt and Roads Initiative from a Canberra towards Victoria level. It has made all kinds of noises on Hong Kong, on the Uyghur problem, on the issue of Tibet. It has now, of course, with the WHO, made life difficult for the government in Beijing. And in various ways, the Australian government has shown that it's on the side of the Americans and not on the side of the Chinese when it comes to geopolitical events. And this was warned to them. It's been told to them several years, but for internal reasons, Australia nevertheless has been in the American camp, and I can't see that changing. So the Chinese are simply going to break up economically as much as possible with Australia the coming years. I don't see any way to prevent this.
From the reading I've had, both countries seem to want apologies from each other. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, forget it. I can't see either side backing down on this. I mean, the Australians will try quiet diplomacy, and they might try some face-saving elements. But I think this is now also internal politics in China, that China sees itself as a rising power. It sees Australia as a very small country that has sort of made too much noise, and it wants to make an example of Australia. And I think Australia is in the lucky position that it can sell much of its mineral and food exports to other countries. It'll be more difficult to replace the students, the businesses, and the tourists that came from China.
And this all seems to be deteriorating in a time when the world has promised to come together to combat the coronavirus pandemic. And of course, every country seems to be suffering financially from this and economically. What do you think about the timing of these tariffs?
I don't think it matters all that much. I mean, this trade dispute has been brewing for quite a while, and of course has been aggravated by the coronavirus pandemic. But the world commodity market is fairly strong. The iron ore price in the world is actually higher than it's been for many, many years, and hence it doesn't really matter so much in terms of timing. I think that Australia is going to have to go through restructuring in its exports anyway, and there's not much difference between now or in other years, I think.
All right, Mr. Paul Frighters, thank you so much again for being with us here on Money Talks. We appreciate it.
Great seeing you.